Hi everybody, tonight we're going to talk about externalities in public policy. This is a long module relative to the others in terms of the number of pages in the book and words on the page and such, but I think my hope is that these slides are going to be able to guide us through it relatively pain-free and put us in a good position to learn more about it tomorrow. So two big chunks to this, and we'll break them down. The first part of this module, we'll talk more about policies toward pollution, how environmental standards, emission taxes, and tradable emission permits are three policies that can be used to control the socially optimal output amount of pollution output. Then we're going to talk about, rather than controlling the effects of production, talk about how policies can influence the levels of production and the levels of consumption that produce those effects. And then we'll talk about externalities and how those affect us as well. So let's get right into it. So three ways here, again, three ways that government policies can influence pollution. The first is environmental standards, pretty straightforward. Legislation written that just says you won't pollute more than this. And that standard is set, and companies aren't allowed to exceed that standard without being fined. The second way the government can do it is by using emission taxes. So basically what they do is they raise the price of polluting. So look at here again the marginal social cost and marginal social benefit graph that we used today in today's module, and think about rather than using environmental standards or strict limits to keep a pollution emitter from producing at the market output, which is right here. Instead, if the socially optimal amount were here, and you see it corresponding to $500 per ton, where the unregulated marketplace would go to here, if we set a tax at $500 at this point, what's going to happen? Well, the polluter has a choice, can either pollute and pay $500 a ton, or can spend money in abatement programs to keep from ever creating that additional pollution and pay the $500 per ton in effect on the abatement measures that take us from here to here. It's simply a deterrent. Now, tradable emission permits are another way that policies can help limit emissions. A tradable emission permit is basically a license to pollute. And this license says that individuals in an industry can pollute certain amounts without having to pay fines. Here's how this works. So let's say the government issues or auctions rather, and that's what happens. They don't set a price, they sell them to the highest bidder. 600 permits in a particular market, each allowing the holder to emit 1 ton of pollution. If this were a market that were going to emit 1,200 tons in a straight market-driven situation, it's removing 600 tons of pollution from the environment, which is a good thing. If there are two firms operating in this marketplace, and you have one firm with very high abatement costs, they may find that it's cheaper to buy a competing firm's pollution permits or tradable emission permit than engage in high-cost pollution abatement activities. Now, it relies on the assumption that there are other firms in the industry that have lower pollution abatement costs, and what happens is you have a high-cost polluter and a low-cost polluter, both who own permits. The low-cost polluter realizes that he can sell the permits for a net higher cost than it's going to cost him to actually abate the pollution. Conversely, the high-cost polluter is going to realize it costs less to buy those permits than it does to abate the pollution. Environmentally, we get the same output. In this case, those 600 tons. It just happens to be traded between these two firms. Pretty effective way, actually, to limit the amount of pollution that polluters put out, and a fairly efficient way for markets to operate because transaction costs are relatively low. Now, let's discuss how policies can influence activities, so production and consumption instead of their side effects. And that corresponds here in the outline for the second part of our discussion. So remember, production and consumption of most goods creates some form of pollution, otherwise called an external cost on society. Not all production and consumption, though, creates a negative externality. Sometimes a positive externality exists. The example I have here is somebody spending money to improve her house and yard, and it benefits the entire neighborhood because property values go up. It's also a nice place to drive or walk past. When the external benefits exist from the production and consumption of a good, so again, external benefit to me as the neighbor, when my neighbor spends her money investing in her property, I am the consumer of that external benefit. Here's what happens. The market will underproduce that good. So purely market driven will underproduce the good, where the society would benefit from more of it, but the market produces less. We're also going to look again at the issue of external costs, like pollution when a good is produced and consumed. We'll see that in a purely driven market situation, the market will overproduce the goods, and where society would benefit from less of that production, the market produces more. We'll show a couple examples there as well. Let's talk about private versus social benefits. Again, one of the ways that we can actually limit production or consumption rather than limiting the effects. Well, when production and consumption of a good provides benefits to a third party, we've already talked about this, the good provides positive externalities to society. So, example, if I just consume a chocolate bar, I get a private benefit, but nobody gets a benefit from that action other than me. Now, arguably, you could say the producer does, but when we're talking here about private benefit, friends, neighbors, other citizens, they don't get benefit from my actions. If I consume a flu shot or a chickenpox vaccine, other people receive some benefit because now those people are less likely to catch the chickenpox or the flu from me because I've been vaccinated. Similarly, if the example we used, if Sue spends a lot of money improving the value of her home, she receives a private benefit, but she also creates a spillover benefit to her neighbors by raising the value of their homes. So let's look now how these two things, the private benefit and the social benefit, where we say some of the benefit, here called spillover benefit, also called a private benefit. Let's see how these, social benefit being here, see how these add up. Total social benefit equals total private benefit plus total external benefit. So total social benefit of a flu shot equals the private benefit to me because I'm less likely to get sick, and if I'm the one who took the shot, and the total external benefit of all of you in my class who are less likely to get sick as a result of me getting that shot. Now, because in economics we like to talk about activity on the margin, we also know that on an incremental basis, the next unit of home improvements or the next flu shot or the next whatever provides marginal social benefit, marginal private benefit, and marginal external benefit. So marginal social benefit equals marginal private benefit plus marginal external benefit, or put into an equation because we love those with acronyms, MSB equals MPB plus MEB. Now let's take a look at what that looks like on a chart.